The biggest BS political talking point these days is that, oh, professors are there to inundate you with their thoughts or whatever, blah, 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 blah. Sure, there are some of those that exist, but for the most part, we're there to get you to learn how to think for yourselves. And I love having these dialogues with these kids who I look at and I see myself when I was their age. And I had a couple professors who were that way with me.
I really admire the way that you have kind of pulled this all together, that you've brought your love of music and your love of literature and how you are putting out work that is aimed at making people how to think and inspiring them to think a little bit differently.
Shit happens. It's not your fault. There's nothing you personally can sometimes do about it. There's not always going to be some sort of universal explanation. But that realization is really affirming. It really gives me a sense of comfort in an odd way. That's, negative capability, that idea that there's something positive in the negative.
All right, well, we are here today on the podcast with a special guest. It is not often that I have a chance to sit down with a friend who I've known for most of my life, and I mean in our case 40 years. And so it's not that often that I get to sit down with somebody that I know most of their life story. But it never ceases to amaze me, what happens when we actually sit down and dedicate some time to really talk about it. So anyway, welcome Scott Levin, my lifelong friend.
Brett, it is great to be here. Thank you so much for having me. You sure you want to do this?
I think you're the one that needs to answer that question, but I'm game. Let's do it.
All right. I'm going to apologize in advance if there are any animals in the background that I've already heard making noises.
That's okay. That happens. We welcome animals. All good. But Scott, this is fun. I'm excited to do this with you. Like I said, I know you well and I know your story well. Our audience might not. So let's start at the beginning. Let's unpack little Scotty. What was it like for you in the early days, you and ML and the fam? Let's talk about kind of some of your early memories. Tell everybody what they should hear about what life was like for you right out of the gate.
Listen, we know where we grew up. We grew up from in a fairly affluent community. More than affluent community. It wasn't always that way with me because Candy, my mother, was, a single mom when I was a young boy. And, you as well understand what it's like growing up with a divorced family and the difficulties that come with that. And I think that both of us very much probably, I guess you could say, we're lucky to find, in a sense, stepfathers that were able to help us out on our way and help us out in terms of our growth. My stepfather, Jay, who is no longer with us, was instrumental in my upbringing. And I mean, over my shoulder, there's his Bob Dylan poster. That's his. And he was instrumental in my growth in so many ways I can't even really, express. I think that, for us growing up in Bexley, Ohio, I think it was last year that Bexley High School, where we went to high school, was named as one of the top public high schools in the country, if I'm not mistaken.
Sounds right.
I mean, we had great advantage, and that's something that I do not take for granted to the day, especially going through what I've gone through over the years and teaching at various universities across the country, seeing young people who did not have the advantages that you and I had growing up. I think that that's something I'm very cognizant of. I'm very cognizant of that. Not just advantage, and I don't want to use the word privilege because that's a stupid fucking word, but it gave us the opportunity to do what we wanted to do. And that's something I'm cognizant of, and I very much am appreciative of, and I feel very lucky to have, to have been born into this position. There's no doubt.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about that and, kind of what the experience was like for you. I think you're right. I mean, look, Bexley's like a really special place. Yeah, I mean, look, I think there's sort of part of what makes Bexley special is just the fact that there is some diversity to it. And not everybody's experience is the same. And, I think it's kind of this little special little place that, is a really wonderful place to grow up. But let's talk, because you mentioned Parents Divorce and Big J, and I remember seeing that Bob Dylan poster. It's funny, I forgot that hung in your home on Fair, right? Yeah. I moved to Bexley when I was 10, and Big J was already in your life at that point, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, anything you want to share about kind of life prior to that? What it was like for you and Michael prior to your parents' divorce? What those very, very early years were like for you?
I mean, you have those memories that will always be there. I think Jay brought a sense of sophistication to our life. There's no doubt. I still have images of Candy's box of Reuniti wine back when we lived in South Bexley, Candy being my mother. And yeah, as and as everyone else is about to learn, I lost my father when I was 13 years old. My birth father, and that was very difficult, and living with Candy and splitting my time between my mother and my father. I kind of look back on those times fondly. I very much so look back on those times fondly. I mean, you and I right now, we could turn this into an hour conversation on college football if you would like. But we don't have to. But my earliest memories of my father are him taking me to Penn State football games, to Pittsburgh Steeler football games, those things do not go away. They're always here. But it's not just the good times; it's the bad shit as well, because there was bad stuff, difficult stuff. When you're growing up in living with your mother, but your father is distant, and you get to see every other week. It's a challenge, but still to the day, it's like, what, the bad stuff happened, and I am not going to by any means, and nor have I ever repressed that or pretended like it didn't exist. It's there, and it's part of me, and it will always be part of who I am. As much as you may just want to focus on the good things in your life, the difficult obstacles, the difficult overcoming, that stuff is always there, and you take that with you, and it's always with you.
Yeah, there's no question about it. We haven't talked about it a lot, and we don't have to. We can talk about as much of it as you want. I remember, the day that you found out your father.
We were playing
passed.
basketball.
Yeah,
We were playing
Ray
basketball in
Walsh's.
Todd Walsh's backyard, and
Yeah,
yeah, I remember it very, very well.
yeah. I remember Michael walking up the driveway, so it was a big moment. Obviously, it was a really pivotal moment in your life, and it was for us too, as your friend. And look, I believe you. That it's a part of who you are, and I'm sure you've thought a lot about it, talked a lot about it. And yet, when you're a kid, you're at that point, you're 13 fucking years old, and even then, as you alluded to or shared, divorced parents and things, sharing homes and things being both good and bad. I over time have really had a lot of recall of a lot of the good memories, which sometimes get lost when there's so much difficulty. But yeah, as a teenager, as a kid, it's tough, and even if you don't know it because it's just the life that you have, it might come out in other ways. So I don't know. I'm just maybe before we move off of it, what happens for you there? Share with the group, who hasn't been side by side, and I'm asking, for other people's benefits, that maybe can relate to this story. What's it like losing a father suddenly, tragically, at 13 years old, and being in your skin at that time?
It's tough to rationalize. It's tough to even put into words. It's stuff that I've dealt with via therapy. I've dealt with via. I actually think that my profession has helped me out more than anything. Not. I don't want to say more than anything, but I think that being a college professor, and especially one in the liberal arts and one who deals with literature, you realize this may have been one of that may have been one of the reasons that put me in this place, is that you look at the difficult things in life. You accept the difficult things in life. You accept that negativity is going to occur. I remember you and I, on a car ride to Cincinnati probably about 10 years ago, got into this very deeply. And I remember relaying to you the phrase negative capability. All right. And that's something that I think has, in a sense, is something that I hold on to as an affirmation of life. More than anything else, which is this notion that simply enough, shit happens. It's not your fault. There's nothing you personally can sometimes do about it. There's not always going to be some sort of universal explanation. But that's it. And that's part of this world we live in. From whether we're 13 years old to now when we're 50 years old, that still there are things that are going to occur. And I think the realization of that, I think the understanding of that, I think it's my personal ability to cognize that idea that not everything is in my control, not everything is controlled at all. That this is a world of chaos. But that realization is really affirming for me. It really gives me a sense of comfort in an odd way. That's negative capability. That idea that there's something positive in the negative. But in understanding that, I think that there is this sense of comfort in this world, because we understand that I say this in my classes all the time. Not every day is sunshiny bright. Right now, I am in Louisiana. It is 70 degrees. It is sunshiny. I want to be on a fucking golf course right now. All right? Instead, I'm talking to you, which is fine. It's awesome. All right. But this isn't, I know that in 2 days, it's going to be rainy and 40 degrees. That is change. That is time. That is the seasons. That is our reality. And there is a sense of comfort and affirmation and understanding that that's just part of life. Part of life. And I mean, I try and say in my classroom that, that this isn't me. I'm just your tour guide here, taking you through these texts, these narratives, these stories, these poems, these ideas, whatever it may be. But it's very much me. And that's very much me.
Let me ask you something, because I think I recall being freshly off of some intense DMT experience when we had that conversation that car ride to Cincinnati. So, because I don't know that I'm now feeling any disagreement with anything you're saying. In fact, it reminds me of something that got thrown through my algorithm recently that I think you will love, since it's right in your music wheelhouse. It was a quote by Kurt Cobain, who said something like, "Thank you for the tragedy. I needed it for my art." And so, I don't recall like what the debate was about that. Maybe it had something to do with God or spirit or my kind of belief in the universe, and yours was just sort of a less faith-based opinion that it's just part of life. Is that the difference?
The word faith is difficult. I take umbrage at times when I'm listening to, I'll give you an example, a sportscaster that says, I believe that Ohio State's going to beat Indiana. Sorry for that. All right.
Okay, well, we're gonna win it all again.
I know 100%. I know that. I'm already bracing myself for that. But
I have faith.
When they use that word, belief, or I've got faith, it's like, what? No. Use your empirical evidence. All right. Look at what the evidence that you have. All right. The data. The experience itself. I don't need anything otherworldly. I don't need anything that cannot be explained. I just need the experiences themselves. And let me retract to that. Stuff that cannot be explained, going back to that whole negative stuff. A lot of that negative stuff cannot be explained, all right? But those are experiences you go through. Those are moments in your life that you deal with. And you extract, in a sense, data from that. All right, you extract, you observe, you learn, you grow. All right, and so part of that is this whole process that we go through. All right, and again, I don't need some sort of anything mystical or that is not tangible for me to understand that. It's just part of the process that we go through in life. And I think that adds to our character. But the thing is, you cannot ignore those moments. One of the things that I love to talk about in the classroom is my experience moving to New York City on August 24th, 2001, 2 weeks before 9/11. And I experienced that, and I felt that, and I went through that. And I remember sitting on my couch in the Bronx, in my underwear, smoking cigarettes, staring at my television, watching these buildings fall. I remember calling, hearing from my friends that the week before I helped move down to Nassau Street, right off of Fulton Street, 2 blocks away. Luckily, one of them was at his internship. The other one was in his apartment. He saw freaking bodies falling from the sky. I remember going to my bathroom, all right, and after hours of just watching the television, and I tell this anecdote all the time, and I remember hearing a freaking sonic boom because there were fighter jets flying over New York City, And I remember diving on my bathroom floor, and I remember sitting there staring at this old, New York City. These are old apartments in the Bronx. And I just remember staring at the bottom of my bathroom floor, just being like, I didn't know what the sonic boom was. No one knew what anything was happening. But I just remember just like being hyper focused on the yellow mold in the corner of of the bathroom floor. And that image is there and will always be there. And I think that's a good thing. That's an experience. I don't mean 9/11's a good thing, but I remember you being conscious of these experiences is so significant in terms of who we are and the growth that we go through as individuals.
Yeah, I agree. No doubt about it. I think we can both agree on that. And I also, as somebody who does have a lot of faith and has come to faith through experience, I think there's, room for both, people that have that belief and those that don't. And the beauty is, nobody really knows, but yeah, I remember that car ride. It was a good conversation. And just kind of backing up a little bit, because you did talk about college football and how that came into your life. And so, aside from, having experienced some of these difficult moments, the quote negative ones, that turn out to really shape who you are and make you who you are, which turns out to be quite the positive, even though you would never want that or wish that to be the case. Let's talk about, you mentioned Candy, Jay, it's you and your brother, you're here in Bexley. You mentioned some of the things that ultimately lead you or serve you in the work that you end up doing, but let's talk about, who you were in those teenage high school years, the kind of stuff that you were interested in, and maybe, we'll see where some of those seeds got planted that ultimately ended up taking you down this path. But, share with the audience a little bit about what it was like before you became Professor Scott Levin.
You know what's funny, BK? Do you remember? I think it was. It wasn't the. It wasn't It wasn't the Torch. It might have been the Torch. Our high school newspaper. Remember?
There was the Torch. Yeah.
It was the Torch. Yeah, and it had, I think, the senior version of the Torch, where you would have most likely to do this, most likely to do that.
Senior superlatives, yeah.
Senior superlatives. And they did a version of Married with Children, all right? That television show. Remember Al Bundy?
I remember the show, but now I don't remember this story.
So Todd Walsh was supposed to be Al Bundy, was most likely to be Al Bundy. Everyone was most likely to be someone.
Yes.
All right. And I was most likely to be Bud Bundy, who was the obnoxious, kind of, I don't know, just the obnoxious kid. All right. And I remember at the time, you know what? That's what I was. I don't want to say, I wasn't necessarily a class clown, but I was fairly obnoxious. I was fairly, I don't know, I don't want to use, what I think the word that we would use in the present day and age is insensitive. All right. But I wasn't necessarily the most politically correct or anything along those lines. And I've turned out to be the complete opposite of that in so many ways. Part of that's still there. There's no doubt. All right. I mean, those of you that, you when you and I have
those of us that actually know you know, yes, that part's still there.
You'll see that side of me.
But
for the most part, I think, even in those days though, there was still something about, at the time I remember I was doing a lot of reading at the time. I remember sitting on my doorstep at 2617 Fair Avenue in Bexley, right after I graduated, reading Dr. Zhivago, reading Russian literature. All right. And there was something very earnest about me at the same time.
That's funny. I never really thought you were reading those books. I thought you were just trying to impress maybe somebody that lived across the street from you, but I don't know.
She was, all right, you know, I deserve that. I deserve that. We don't need to go there. But yeah, maybe that was one of the reasons.
But maybe something got in. You were actually reading some of those books.
Do you remember? This is incredible, and you know, I do also relay this to my classes on occasion. I mean, we're Bexley's a extremely progressive high school, if you think about it. Not just now, but even in retrospect. But I remember we used to sneak off to in study hall, we'd sneak off to the library, and in our library in 1991, 1992, there was a version of Bret Easton Ellis's American Psycho, an extremely graphic novel, there are instances that you could very easily claim to be pornographic, and we would, you know, sit down and read this stuff and giggle about this stuff, and I became hyper focused on this novel. I don't know why. And it wasn't because of the pornographic moments. It wasn't because of the violence. There was just something else about that novel I just didn't quite understand, and I wanted to understand. And I remember going to college and I started to read other Bret Easton Ellis novels. And I remember the epigraph of American Psycho, or the epigram, you know, those little quotes that they have. I always mix up those two words, epigram, epigraph, whatever. It's like a quote at the beginning of a novel to kind of set the tone.
It's all ball bearings these days.
The quote was from Fyodor Dostoevsky's Notes from Underground. And I remember reading another Bret Easton Ellis novel where there was another reference to Fyodor Dostoevsky's Notes from Underground, and I'm a freshman at Boston University, and I'm fixated on these Bret Easton Ellis novels from the the 80s and the early 90s, and I'm like, why is this Russian literature or Russian writer coming up so much? And next thing you know, I'm in the library at Boston University reading Fyodor Dostoevsky's Notes from Underground, and then I'm reading Crime and Punishment, then I'm reading The Brothers Karamazov, then I'm reading The Idiot, and I'm reading all of his other novels. And it's odd that those moments in high school of us sneaking off in study hall to read, you know, lascivious stuff from this novel ended up leading me in college to, going from a finance major to an economics major to a philosophy major to an English major in a matter of a year and a half, because I just couldn't get this stuff out of my head. And it was just a path, and I didn't plan it. It just happened. It was just chaos.
Well, let me ask you something.
Go on.
Yeah, let me ask. Yeah, so I'm kind of curious about that, just to tug on that a little bit, because, you said that it just happened. Well, like, what do you make of that? I mean, what was it? You know, it was obviously something that caught your attention. There was something in it that spoke to you.
Yeah.
You know, what was it? Just you kind of continuing to follow something that really felt alive to you? What is it?
You know, that's a great question. And I think it might go back to where we kind of came from, is there was an emptiness to the character in American Psycho, that there was something dead in this man, and that I was fascinated by. And I think, you know, that he, as disgusting as it is in terms of the violence and the pornography that are the obscenities or the vulgarity, whatever you want to call it, that exist within this narrative, there was something searching in him, which I think for me, from a young age, there was something searching for me. Growing up where we grew up, I think that there was something searching in me for something more than what existed around us. And what existed around us was what, in a sense, existed around this individual in this narrative, which was materialism. Living your life strictly enough by materialism. And this individual who lived his life strictly by materialism was dead inside. All he cared about was where he was going to eat, who he was seen with, what he was wearing, the labels on his clothes. And it's a satire. It's over the top, okay? But still, there's something dead in him about this idea of materialism. And I think growing up where we grew up, as beneficial as it was and is, I think that there is a false narrative that can be constructed, I think, for a lot of people that do grow up around us, that in a sense are just driven by what car they drive, where do they live, what are they wearing, what are they eating. That for me, I think at an early age, there had to be something more of substance that I was looking for. And that's what I wanted. That's why there was that line from finance major to econ major to philosophy major to English major. It was looking for something of more substance. I needed something more than just materialism, more than just appearance. And that's what I wanted. And I think
That's interesting.
in a sense, found it.
Yeah, that's really interesting. It's funny because I mean, the way that I hear you describe where we grew up, you would think, it sounds to me like it's like Brentwood or Beverly Hills or something, like I sort of didn't really feel that way about Bexley in the same way. I mean, it was clearly like people, were fine, and some of them were really wealthy, but I don't know. I just never really, I didn't feel that in the same sense, but it is interesting that really did strike a chord with you. There was something there that really had you feeling that the materialism was not who you were and wasn't something that you wanted to continue to pursue in your life. Mm-hmm. And that really jumped out at a pivotal time.
And listen, I am a proud capitalist, right? And I've come to understand that, that materialism it's not necessarily a horrific thing, but when it drives who you are, and again, it goes back to that character from this novel where everyone in his wake, and this is Reagan, 1980s Manhattan. This is, in investment banking, and no slight towards my brother, all right, or my brother's friends, all right, my brother who went into investment banking, all right, but him and his friends used to look up to this character in this novel like he was a god of some kind, and I used to pity this man. And it's understanding that yes, you can have the finer things in life, but there's got to be something else. There's got to be something else that drives you. And I think that's one of the reasons why, I mean, listen, I always have enjoyed having conversations with you, because you are someone, I think, that is interested in not just in the shiny things in life, but you want to understand something more. You want to understand something deeper. And if that's led you to faith, God bless you, my friend. All right. But I know that even now you're still searching. And the important thing for me, I think, the search never ends. I don't ever want to be complacent.
Yeah, I think you're right. You and I do really share that feeling of wanting depth and really valuing depth and continuing to, search for it and make sure that it is at the center of our lives. And I think that is a common bond. And it's really, as I've gotten older, something that's more and more important to me in my relationships. It's it's why I like to do this podcast, because it gives me a chance to really have deep, meaningful conversations with people. I just find it to be interesting just to kind of unpack this with you a bit, because we've never really talked about that. And I do remember, Michael and the crew, and I wasn't actually sure that I don't think that I knew how that book hit you. I remember it, being something that really did hit you, and I didn't read it at that time, but I thought people were mostly kind of idolizing this, whack job in a, sort of, kind of fun way. But let me ask you, because also, I'm not like giving you a layup here, but I do recall you being a pretty decent athlete. I'll let you correct me if you were better than that or not. But I'd give you at least pretty decent. I remember Michael also being a good athlete, and you and the crew who used to like to lift, and football was a big part of the life. Sort of like on the surface, more on the jockey side of things. And so I'm kind of curious, you're a teenager, you're in high school, you're starting to read some deep stuff. You're starting to think, apparently, about what matters to you. And yet, like you were kind of in a world where that wasn't really the scene that you were running in. And so just in hindsight, kind of wondering, to what extent maybe that was a conflict for you, and maybe more than I knew, or than I don't know if you've talked about that much before.
It's a really cool paradox in retrospect, that I kind of appreciate, because I was, for lack of a better term, a jock, and to think about how I hate stereotypes. I really do. I hate stereotypes, and I love it when I'm watching or listening to a professional football player, someone like Myles Garrett comes to mind. I'll bring that up for you because you like the Browns, and who is so insightful, and who is someone curious, all right, and someone who breaks the mold of what you would expect from an athlete. And that's I clearly wasn't cognizant of it at the time. I'm cognizant of it now.
I just need to inform our audience that you're like a insane Pittsburgh Steeler fan. So I'm like wondering, what, like, are you good? We're good.
Everybody, yeah, no,
okay?
we're good. I remember
props
this.
To Myles Garrett.
Are you
trying to like recruit him, or
no? I'm not trying.
It is possible.
Listen,
the Browns are bad enough; they might not.
TJ Watt just had surgery for a collapsed lung, so it wouldn't be the worst of things. Yeah, all right, okay. But
I figured there was an angle. Go ahead.
I'm with that said, I remember just listening to him during. I mean, this is years ago when he was during his interviews for the NFL draft. And I just remember just like again being shocked, and I'm not sure why, but I think our culture is in a sense we are inundated with this idea of the jock being this thoughtless whatever. All right, someone who is not insightful, someone who is not well read, someone who cannot communicate well. And I remember listening to this guy talk, and I think at the time he talked about writing poetry. And I was just like, holy shit. And again, this was something I was not, attempting to do when I was younger. This is not something that I was, again, aware of when I was young. But seeing that paradox, that break of the stereotype, is something that I always have just loved. Transitioning to Penn State football, and I don't want to get into Penn State football now.
Apologize to me if anything. I'm sorry.
They had an all Big Ten defensive end about 10, 15 years ago by the name of, or maybe even longer ago, Aaron Maben, who ended up being a first-round draft pick for the Buffalo Bills, and he was a painter. And he was an amazing painter. And I think this was on one of those episodes of Hard Knocks where they showed him painting. And I just love those moments where all of a sudden you see that stereotype being broken. But again, I wasn't aware of it when I was 17 years old. I wasn't aware. Listen, I was working out. I loved football. I loved playing football. I was decent at football. I mean, I was pretty good. But I wasn't aware of the fact that, at the same time that I was, reading Russian literature, at the same time that I was writing, I actually just went and did this. I don't know why I did this, but something came up when I was scrolling something on Instagram or something else, and I went back and looked. And I used to write. Did journalism in high school, and so I wrote for the Torch, our high school newspaper. I won a national award our senior year. I don't know if you remember it, but I wrote, again, a national award from Columbia University for journalism. And it was for sports editorial, and it was on my reflections of playing my last high school football game. And I just, I saw that, I was like, holy cow, this is still on the internet. You can still find it. My name on the internet from 1993, winning this award from Columbia freaking University. And I think that kind of, sums it up. And I looked, it's interesting because I looked at there was like first place, second place, third place, fourth place, fifth place, and second, third, fourth, fifth place. They were all fairly, oh God, I don't want to go this route, but they were all fairly kind of, do I want to say political? Yeah, they were political types of sports articles. Mine was simply enough an emotive sports article about simply enough playing my last football game and knowing that I was playing my last football game. And I think that kind of represents this paradox that you just pointed out.
Yeah, I do remember that now that you bring it up. And the reason I ask is really because at that time, in the early 90s, I don't think it was as common to have people that, had different versions of themselves or sides to themselves and have that be freely expressed. I mean, we still did live in a time in the world where, maybe it wasn't okay or accepted. I mean, yeah, Bexley is great and it's a lot of wonderful things, but it's in the Midwest, it's in Ohio. I mean, it's maybe Columbus is a little more of a progressive part of that, but that wasn't really always the case. And yeah, as for progressive as Bexley is, I would argue it's not really that progressive. Maybe in the big scheme of things, it's still very much a fixed mindset, by and large. And so yeah, I mean, I know in my own experience, I really also walked a very mainstream line. But would find my way into the art room and into the pit with the trench coat mafia, and that sort of sung to me. That's where my heart was, and it was in these sort of outcast and in the art room where the music was different and people they looked different and they were doing super creative shit. But I was a little scared to show that side. I was maybe, not secure enough to do that. And so that's the reason I asked the question is I love that, people can be both. Why not be able to love football and love poetry, but it just, when you're a teenager, at that time, I was insecure about those things.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and probably so was I. That's probably why I did it on my own. Didn't talk much about it, and probably just a couple of people like you knew about it. And I'm trying to think, what concerts did we go to? We saw together.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that because I was just with Javer the other night, and he brought up going to see Tom Petty at the convention center. Big J dropped us off.
Yep.
So I know we did that. I don't know what else was on that list. I mean, there was a few shows. He was talking about some of the stuff we saw at the Newport.
Diggable Planets.
Diggable Planets, for sure. Yeah, there was a few really good shows that.
You're missing the big one, man.
The big one. Let's see. Did we see Beastie Boys together?
I didn't. I missed the Beastie Boys one because it was during football season. I missed. You guys went down to Bogart's in Cincinnati to see both the Beastie Boys and to see Public Enemy, and I missed both of those concerts because I was. It was during football season.
There was one more.
You're still missing the great story. The greatest of them.
Go ahead. Remind me. Go ahead.
Oh my God! It was a school night, dude.
Oh, the GNR show in Dayton. Yeah.
Thank you.
Of course. Yeah. Yeah. That's a, not just an epic memory for us. I mean, that was like, Rolling Stone talking about Axl coming on at 1 a.m. or whatever it was.
It was actually on MTV News the next day. I still remember the next day MTV News talking about that. But the thing is, we got to see Soundgarden opening for them. And I think that you and Jabber introduced me to Soundgarden.
Yeah.
And I think it was probably only the three of us standing up cheering for, or clapping for Soundgarden. No one else knew who the hell they were. And then GNR came on a couple hours later, and we got home at 6 a.m. And I'm pretty sure Candy made me go to school. I don't think Terry made you go to school.
Probably not. Yeah, those were the good old days where there weren't like massive fines if you went late. And rock stars could be rock stars and trash hotel rooms and show up when they wanted to.
Yeah.
All right. So let's talk a little bit, because you mentioned getting into college and getting into your major. And I want to just kind of move it along and talk about, this spark that really starts to land in you that you want to make this your life. That you want to really start to pursue your education, as an English major and beyond, which, ultimately leads you to the work that you're doing today. But why don't you, unpack that a little bit for us?
It's funny because when you sent me, or you said you were interested in this or interested in talking to me because of my new YouTube page, and you sent me some. I watched a decent amount of your podcasts. You sent me one by Jenny from Jenny's Ice Cream, which it's still to the day. Watching that, it warmed my heart so much because I remember in 1998. When I was not sure what I was going to do with my life, whatever, and I was bartending at Fresno in the Short North, and Jenny was one of my regulars. I don't know how old she was, in her probably early 20s as well, and Jenny used to come in all the time with her her and a couple friends, and she had just opened a store in the North Market, and it was right after that where I was like, all right, I'm going to apply for graduate school. And it's like now I'm, drive to Shreveport when I want to get some good food to Whole Foods. And there's Jenny's Ice Cream. And she had just opened that. And I think back to, God, it was 1998. And it's amazing to think about just the kind of randomness of that. And I didn't know what I wanted to do. I knew I loved to read. And then when I got into the classroom at Ohio State University, the Ohio State University, the Ohio State University, Ohio, I felt at home. I really did. And I knew that this was something that I could do. I knew this was something I could do for the rest of my life, and it is something that I wanted to pursue. And even, working my way through my dissertation and the whole idea of getting a PhD when I was at Fordham University, I was cognizant of the fact that I would never be a scholastic rock star in a sense. I would never be someone who just publishes article after article after article, book after book after book. But my dissertation advisor said to me at the time, she said, and my dissertation advisor is amazing, and she was amazing. And she did her PhD at Princeton, and she has published numerous books. But she said to me at the time, I will never be as comfortable in the classroom as you are. And I think that's part of higher education these days, is that there is this sense of pressure on, that universities want to hire people that just churn out article after article after article, book after book after book, versus the pedagogical aspect, the teaching aspect, the aspect in the classroom, where I am as comfortable as I've ever been, every single day. Whether I know if I wake up and I have bad anxiety, or if I'm just feeling jittery or whatever, I know when I get into the classroom that everything's going to be okay. And it typically is. That's that. Ohio State note on this point. Linebacker Matt Wilhelm was one of my first students in 1999. He went on to be a national champion for that 2002 team. And our buddy Adam just sent me a weird meme. His son is now committed to Ohio State University. We're so old.
Yeah, no shit. Yeah, I mean, I got 2 out of college already. So let's talk about this a little bit, because it is an interesting thing. You end up a professor and kind of, going down this route. You talked about how much you love to teach and how much you really love being in the classroom. And I am interested in kind of some of the things that this is kind of usually the fun part for me, where I can see some, some of the threads from childhood that end up, being who you are and how you end up expressing yourself. And you talked a little bit about kind of what universities want and what they're looking for, which I don't pretend to know. But it doesn't surprise me that there's, a lot of bureaucracy and, just maybe bullshit. I don't know where you teach, to what degree, that exists, but I imagine it's true everywhere, right? So, you end up taking on subject matter that does really, because I know what you're doing and I know who you are, become this real full expression of yourself. And it takes this paradox, it takes this kind of multifaceted love for a lot of different things. It takes all of your experiences, which you mentioned, and the value that you have on those, and it brings something into the classroom that's pretty unique, and it brings it in a way that you love, that you get to do and really enjoy, and in a way in which you get to bring something to your students that I think they really love too. So why don't you talk a little bit about kind of this niche you've carved out for bringing all of these various things that don't appear to be connected, together in a really connected way, and in a way that really is a real pure expression of yourself.
I mean, listen, I don't mean to, this is shameless self-promotion, but if you go to my YouTube page and if you watch those talks, that is me in the classroom for the most part, minus a lot of the inappropriate anecdotes and expletives. And I do think that being a professor, and this is no slight to my high school teacher friends or anything else, but when individuals sometimes call me a teacher or whatever, and I say, there's a big difference between a professor and a teacher. And I say you don't call a cook or you don't call a chef a cook. There's a comfort level, I think, involved in being in that room. And for me, I mean, just this morning. All right, this morning I had a class that was an hour and 15 minutes long, and I walked in there and I didn't sleep well. And my dog kept me up late and woke me up early, and I wasn't feeling good. And I got in there and we started to talk and we started to have a conversation. And by the time I was done, I just felt great. It was like I had, taken medication or something, which I, didn't. And it was just a panacea of some kind for me to be in that room. And I think part of this does go back to me understanding who I was at 19, 20, 21 years old versus me at 15, 16, 17 years old. I could never teach high school. I could never teach myself at 15 or 16 years old. I love having these conversations. I love not just lecturing, but having conversations and dialogues with young adults, which is what they are, who are in the midst of becoming, who are in the midst of uncertainty, who don't know what they want to do, who do know what they want to do. And I mean, the biggest BS kind of political talking point these days is that, professors are there to inundate you with their thoughts or whatever, blah, 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 blah. Sure, there are some of those that exist, but for the most part, we're there to get you to learn how to think for yourselves. And I love having these dialogues with these kids who I look at and I see myself when I was their age. And I had a couple professors who were that way with me, and who were able to have that conversation with me. And this is the in between, and I think that's the cool thing about college, which isn't for everyone, by the way. But if you're there, that's the cool thing about college. It's this ultimate in between adolescence and between you becoming a professional or who you're going to be. But there's so much that can happen in that interim. And I love that process. And I don't just mean English majors. I love my computer science majors. I love my honors class more than anything, because in my honors class, I get computer science, engineers, all right, math, finance, business, nursing, whatever, all right? And just, being able to show these kids that, that the liberal arts, I'm not here to teach you to become freaking F. Scott Fitzgerald or to turn you into a teacher or whatever. I want you to become good thinkers. And that's what's so significant. And I think that's what college used to be about. I'm not sure if it still is. It's becoming closer to a trade school. But I really do think that I am of maybe an idealistic old schooler who thinks that, yes, I can help you become a better thinker by talking about language.
Well, one of the things that I think, I'm guessing, my perception of what makes you a likable teacher, which is something that I didn't have much in my life, and why I think I do remember the few teachers that I connected with. And I don't want to blame, I don't want to blame Bexley or the fine institution of the University of Arizona, but because there probably were a lot more high quality teachers there than I was, in tune enough to realize. But I imagine one of the things that really makes you a very good teacher, professor, is how relatable you are. I think it is. You talked about profanity and some of the things that maybe you can't say in the classroom. I question whether or not you're actually not saying those things, but I was an adjunct professor at Ohio State for a few years. I taught. Well, I was supposed to be teaching a real estate development class, and I my only requirement for agreeing to teach the class was that I wasn't going to use a syllabus, which just allowed me to do whatever the hell I wanted to do, and the kids loved it. And I think that you talk like somebody they can connect with. You use language that they understand. You humanize yourself by relating to them about music and culture. And then there's I imagine, and I want to hear your thoughts on this, because it's your actual experience, and I'm sure you've given this a tremendous amount of thought, and you're probably very strategic about it. But that creates an opening. There's like an automatic, like energetic shift when a kid walks in the room and they can look at somebody and hear somebody talk in a way that they're like, oh, I wonder what else this guy has to say. And then you can hit them with like some, ancient poetry or whatever that maybe they wouldn't have been open to hearing about in the past. Is that part of your strategy and secret to success?
I mean, I don't know if it's a strategy or if it's just part of who I am. All right. And this morning we started class with, I drew a diagram. First thing I did, I didn't take attendance. I just drew a diagram. And I said, all right, you're this car and you're at a red light and you're turning left. And in front of you is another car who's also at the red light and he's turning left. What do you do when the light turns green? And this was me venting my frustration out of someone who, when I was driving to school, just sat there and didn't know that both cars go left and just sat there and drove me nuts. So, little things like that. And I didn't even think about it. I was just like, I'm going in there and that's how I'm beginning class today. And everyone laughed, and everyone, I think it created this kind of, all right, we're ready to go.
Yeah.
Those everyday little things, I think that are so important that you can talk to them about everyday little things. Professors get a very bad reputation for numerous reasons. For being way too political, which is, again, sometimes true. And at the same time, as I as I point out in the forward of my YouTube page, professors are awkward. All right, I don't mean all of them, but a lot of them. All right, a lot of them are awkward. They're difficult to talk to. They're not sociable individuals. And going back to your point about, the bureaucracy within, the university, a lot of these people should never be in administrative positions. They were not meant to be, not by any means. They're not supposed to be making those types of decisions. It's just the way it is. And again, a lot, not all. I don't want to generalize. But I think for me, in terms of, my successes, in terms of getting tenure, in terms of getting a professorship, an endowed professorship, all of that kind of stuff. A lot of it is just being a human being as opposed to an automaton of some kind, or just being able to spew jargon. I can bullshit with the best of them. I think I would have made a good stand-up comedian, BK. I do. I really do. The more I think about it, I think I would have been.
Yeah, you got some material you want to work out?
I've got some
almost
material.
Out of time, but this is your shot. Who knows who's listening?
I don't know, but it's like, you think about it. There's a very performative aspect of getting up in front of the classroom to be successful.
No doubt about it. Hey, listen, it's never too late. I'd love to see you. I don't know if I ever shared this story with you, but I had a fraternity brother of mine who we all thought was just the fucking funniest guy on the planet, Andrew Lear. And went to like a open mic night, and the whole frat went, and he fucking killed. I mean, he killed. I mean, we were dying. The place was erupting. It was. I mean, we thought this guy was like, this is it. I mean, he's gonna make it. And then he went back the next week, and none of us were there, and he just did the same material and fucking bombed. So it's tough, but it's never too late. All right, so listen. It's really interesting. I love spending this time with you and unpacking this journey. And you talked about the YouTube channel and some of the stuff that you're doing. And again, I really admire the way that you have kind of pulled this all together. That you've brought your love of music and your love of literature and your love for teaching people how to think, young adults how to think, and how you are really putting out work that is aimed at making people how to think and inspiring them to think a little bit differently, even if sometimes you're doing that inaccurately. For example, like your work on the Dead, which is just like fucking disaster. But anyhow,
hold on.
We are all entitled to our own opinions.
Nice to the Grateful Dead.
Nice.
And by the way,
yes,
thank you, because if it was that talk has gotten more listens, more views than any other talk. Mm-hmm. And I think it's not inaccurate.
That's why you wanted to come on the podcast.
You wanted me on there just if I wanted to put the Grateful Dead on that on my YouTube page, I wouldn't be here. But I just want to clear one thing up. I speak very highly of the Grateful Dead on that talk, as much shit as I give them.
Okay, that's good. It's never too late. Listen, there's all sorts. The great thing about the Dead, unlike most bands ever, really, that I can think of, is there is a whole nother generation of bands, literally, out there playing the music.
Oh,
and
yeah.
It kills. It's really good.
I know.
Dylan just went to see Grateful Shred last night in LA. So we can still take this music in. It's not too late to get you to become ahead. But Scotty, I love you. I love what you're doing. Anything you want to leave the audience with about your work? They're gonna figure out how to find you. We'll put that all in the show notes, links, and all that stuff. But what do you want to leave the audience with about what you're doing, who you are, what you want to see in the world, where this is all headed? Anything that's on your mind.
Where I am right now, I think that we talked about this whole becoming thing. All right, and you can change. You're not stuck. I think that is so important. That change is, like I said before, inevitable. I am right now a tenured college professor. In 5 years, I may be something different. BK, you are what you are. You are changing. You can become something different. And there's nothing wrong with that. And you and I are past middle age at this point. God, does that just sound macabre? But that's the reality. And, there's nothing wrong with it. And I don't want to ever be stagnant. I don't ever want to be complacent. I'm sounding a little bit like one of my talks, so you can go listen to that shit and hear it there. But I really appreciate this opportunity, Brett. I really enjoyed this conversation, man. And I miss you. And I wish we could have done this face to face. And I can't wait to see you next time I'm back in Columbus.
Amen. Same. Miss you too. I am sorry. And those that know you well will share in the apology that we kept you off the golf course today. Because I know, that was going to be the round of your life. But I love being with you always. I love being in conversation with you. I really do value your way of thinking and your way of being. And I appreciate you being vulnerable and sharing with me about your life to this work. Even though, we know the story, we don't talk about it a lot, and we do get to fuck around a bit, and that's great too. But it's great to be with you in this way, and to be on the journey with you, my friend.
Dude, always, always, always a pleasure. Please give my best to Katie and the boys. All right.
I will.